Okay, spoiler alert. If you don't want to know about No Time to Die in this film, you don't want to know about spoilers, why would you click on this video? I've clearly indicated that it is a spoiler heavy video. Now, in the last one, I talked about how the movie wasn't woke. I talked about a lot of the stuff there. I'm going to get more into that in a more specific sense in this. So if you just watch that last video, I'm going to kind of be treading the same ground that I did, but I'm going to elaborate here. So, there were a few things that we knew, or we thought we knew, that, well, leaks and so on, and bits of information that came out about the new 007 character, and a lot of it was kind of like race baiting, I think. But I think if there was any truth in that, because it didn't make it into the final cut of the film, there was supposed to be a scene. Well, I'll get to that in a moment. But if there was any truth to that, I think they've edited it because I'm pretty sure they did. To be honest, I'll be specific. Basically, you have the new 007 is a black woman. Now, having a black woman in a role in a Bond film as a strong character is nothing new. They did it back in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. Can't remember the 90s. Well, maybe, I don't know. But I mean, I can name them. You had in the Sean Connery ones. You had there was Bambi and Thumper. One of them was a black woman with short hair. Oh my God, we can't allow that. And she kicks Bond's ass. That wasn't some kind of agenda. That was just she was just a person. there was no like race baiting in there. They didn't have an agenda. They just did it. Nobody noticed because shock horror in the West, we're not systemically racist, despite what people say. But then that's a whole avenue we could go down. But they did it again. I mean, they did it throughout the 70s. Rosie Carver, the CIA agent in Live and Let Die. She's black with short hair, and she says she'd rather take cyanide than sleep with James Bond. I mean, she does sleep with him eventually, but yeah, she has a bit of an attitude about it. We can't have that, can we? So that was something that they said in this. You had this black female 007, and she was going to reject Bond because she's a strong, independent woman. And there was going to be this scene where you meet her where they say, "Come in, 007." And instead of Daniel Craig walking in, this black female with short hair walks in, and you're like, oh my God, because everybody's racist and it's there to like push buttons on people. Well, that bit isn't in the film, but there is a bit where they do say, can you put a call out for 007, and it kind of cuts to the next scene and you see Daniel Craig. I think possibly that was the bit where maybe she walks in, but they cut that out. Now, it would have been a bit race baiting to do that if they had done that, because again, it's like, oh, you haven't got a problem with black females, have you? In the movie, we don't have a problem with black females at all, but then if you make it an issue, then you've got an issue, all that stuff. And people don't want to see that in films. If we want escapism, we've got enough of that stuff in the real world. So obviously that was something that was leaked, that was a scene in the film. Now, it was coming from places like the Daily Mail and so on, which suck. But at the same time, it would have sucked if that had been in the film, if they'd have done it from that angle of race baiting. So again, all that would have been woke, and it's just a shame that it then prompts outlets like the Daily Mail to then kind of call it out, which is right to call it out, but then opens the door to people like the Daily Mail. It's a horrible situation anyway, and it was just ugly. And it's great that that's not in the film anyway, but again, did they cut that out? I suspect they did. But there's nothing really else in the film. I mean, she is the new 007 temporarily. Again, I'm giving out spoilers here, but later on, she gives the 007 status back to Bond because she knows she's not as good as him. And pretty much every scene that they're in together, he outshines her in every way. There's so many scenes in there where he's just showing how much better at the job than she is. So I don't know how much of that was edited or so, but again, it's not because we don't want a black woman outdoing our white man. It's just like we don't want this character that we haven't properly established to overshadow James Bond. That's not why we come to see a James Bond movie. Just like we didn't want Jeremy Renner to take over the Bourne franchise. Not that we don't like Jeremy Renner. I love Jeremy Renner. He's awesome. But it wasn't good bringing him into the Bourne franchise to be like the new face of it. We want Matt Damon, we want Jason Bourne. That's the thing. So that was always going to be the problem with this if they'd have gone in that direction. But then they would have reframed it as racism if we didn't like it. So that was the baiting point. Anyway, I've just spent minutes talking about this because that was like a massive like story leading up to this, and I've been waiting to see like, have they gone there? Have they ruined this franchise with this like woke agenda? And they haven't. They really haven't. That's one thing, but there wasn't really anything else in the film either. There was talk about Bond in the Me Too era. And this wasn't the Daily Mail saying that. This was the film director. This was the producer, well, not the producers, but the actors and so on, doing interviews and so on. And, well, the previous director as well, I think Danny Boyle, who was originally going to direct this, I seem to recall some talk that he was wanting to bring like something that was relevant to the Me Too things. Like, how is that relevant to James Bond? But there's none of it in the film. So, happy times. I'll leave it there for the work thing, because I've talked way more than that than is needed, really, because ultimately he's not in the film. So, another aspect I talked about in the non-spoiler video was the fact that in this movie there's this sort of romance thing, and the fact that he's in love with the character played by Léa Seydoux, Madeleine Swann, who we were introduced to in Spectre. Obviously that whole thing was introduced in Spectre as well. I mean, they were in love in that one as well. I didn't really buy that. It seemed a bit kind of forced in that film. But in this one it elaborates a little bit more. The film starts out pretty much where the last film left off. But then it becomes evident to Bond that Madeleine Swann has some connection to Blofeld that he doesn't know about, and he's maybe like working for Spectre in some way. She denies it, but he doesn't believe it, so they part companies at that point, and then it cuts to 5 years later. So they haven't seen each other for 5 years. Bond is kind of heartbroken, and so is she. They didn't really need to split up, though, evidently, because it's kind of like a situation when you've got two people and this has happened to everybody, including myself, so I'm sure you can relate. You've got two people in a relationship. One thinks the other one is cheating, but they're actually not. And because of that, not because of actual cheating that's occurred, but because of the accusations, the couple has to split up. Similar situation here, but it's not the cheating thing. It's Bond thinks that she's working for Spectre. There's a truth to that, but not really. Not in the way that he's maybe seeing it. And as a result, that's why they split up at the beginning of the film. So at the beginning of the film, there's a reference to having all the time in the world, which was a nod to On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And the bit of road where in On Her Majesty's Secret Service ended, where Diana Rigg's character got shot, that road is in this film. It's brilliant, just as they're saying that as well. And at the end of the film as well, that bit of the road is used. But I'll get to the end of the film at the end of this video. I'm trying to do it chronologically, sequentially. So that's like a big part of this anyway, the whole romance thing. It feels a bit more believable in this than it did in Spectre. There's a lot more revisiting to previous films in this as well, in terms of there are some major references to the Vesper Lynd character, and also Mr. White as well. Nothing major, but obviously there's fundamental links because Madeleine Swann is the daughter of Mr. White, but you get to kind of see some unfinished business that Spectre had. There's a thing about a virus, basically. I kind of talked about that in the last video. That's the major plot of this. Basically, in a nutshell, there's a virus, and it's kind of DNA specific, and there's a lot of stuff to do with DNA mapping and so on. Without getting into the technicality of how that works, it basically could lead to an end of the world scenario, and Bond stops it, obviously. The major spoiler on this that I'm going to just drop is that the film ends with Bond dying, which is mental. I don't know quite how comfortable I feel with that. I have to say, because a lot of people are just going to think, oh, that's like terrible. It calls back to Ian Fleming. I mean, granted, they kind of retconned it in the next book, but the original book From Russia with Love, Bond dies, clearly dies in that film. Whereas in From Russia with Love, the film, obviously, the ending of that film is fairly similar. He has a bit of a scuffle with the Rosa Klebb character. She has a knife in her shoe in the film, and he just kind of fights her off, and she gets shot by somebody else. Bond survives. In the book, he doesn't. She kicks him, and he dies. He drops dead. So if we're saying that this is such a departure by killing Bond, it isn't really. Ian Fleming went there, so you can't say fairer than that. They haven't done it before, so again, it's left a mark on the franchise. In terms of continuity, we know this is Daniel Craig's last one. He goes at it with literally a blaze of glory. There's a lot of missiles coming down. He has to kind of stay back and make sure the blast doors are open so these missiles can come down on this island and blow it up so this virus gets destroyed. And I heard some people say it was an ambiguous death. I don't think it is. I'm pretty sure he's dead. You see the missile right in front of him and boom. I mean, I don't see how he could have survived that. I mean, I know it's Bond and all that, but yeah, he's dead. Yeah. So there you go. I mean, if he's not dead, he's pretty fucked up. Let's just put it that way. And we don't want to. I don't know what's worse. And obviously, well, not obviously, but one thing I would say, if he's not actually dead, that ruins the end of the movie because it's basically his sacrifice and so on. Him dying wasn't pointless. So that's a big thing anyway. So I wasn't too disappointed in that. I mean, obviously it was farewell to Daniel Craig anyway. So I mean, whether they kill him off or not, you're not going to see him again. And this was a different iteration of Bond that we'd ever had before. This was something that, although it does have callbacks to previous films as if they are kind of canon, it didn't really work for a number of reasons, you know, in terms of chronologically speaking anyway. So what if they bring back a new Bond actor in a few years and we say, well, isn't he dead? There's such a continuity flaw. Well, there's so many continuity flaws with franchise. Who cares? Who really cares that you can't do that? They've killed him already. There's many other franchises where that's been done before, and they've just kind of retconned it and just moved on. I'm pretty sure we can forgive that with Bond, since we've had so many other continuity errors over the years. So what else could I say? Obviously, there was something that leaked. Like I was going back to the woke stuff that leaked. Another aspect of that was they said that they watered the character down because now he has a daughter. Well, that is true, he does. But I got the impression from the information that's coming out that you kind of catch up with him, and he's now got a daughter. Like throughout the film, you don't actually know that this daughter even exists till much later in the film, and that it's his. So again, I don't think that they watered the character down in that sense. I don't think him having a daughter ties in with a more woke Bond or anything like that, or a Bond that we haven't seen before, because obviously we've had the George Lazenby thing, we've had like a more human Bond with like Timothy Dalton and so on. So again, I don't think that this was like too big of a departure. Obviously they haven't given him a child before, but I don't think it's like that unrealistic, to be fair. He's a human. James Bond has always been a human. He's like Timothy Dalton always said when he was playing him in interviews, he's not a Superman. You know, he bleeds, he's got emotions. He can have a kid. So what? You know, it's after 25 films, seriously, they need to start bringing in some like new aspects to their character, and they've done it in this, and I don't have a problem with it. Having a kid, dying, whatever, retiring, it's something different, it's something new, and they did it well. That's as good as I can say. So there's plenty of other stuff I could talk about. And I've talked about plenty of stuff in the previous review as well. Any other spoilers I can give? They bring back Felix Leiter in this film. Obviously, is it Jeffrey Wright? I think the actor's name is. We haven't seen him since Quantum of Solace. He dies in this film as well, but he does it it was dealt with in such a way. Basically, it was a farewell to the character. I would have liked to have seen him maybe in a future film as well, but he wasn't in the last two, so whatever. He dies an honourable death, let's just put it that way. I don't want to spoil stuff for the sake of it, but yeah, obviously he dies. We haven't seen a Felix Leiter die in any of these films before. I mean, in terms of continuity, we've seen Felix Leiter getting fed to the sharks, losing a leg, and then they brought him back in Casino Royale. So I mean, whatever. Stuff like that is, like I say, the reason I can totally forgive the fact that they've killed off Bond, and if they bring him back, he's going to be alive again, obviously. So that's not going to be like a problem. I think I'll cut it short because the video has been quite long, but those are some of the major spoilers I would drop for this film anyway. So if you haven't seen the film and you kind of don't mind watching a spoiler review, I hope I haven't put you off the film. As I said in my previous video, I would give this film, I wouldn't say it's one of the best ones, and I love Bond films, I like all of them. But yeah, I would say that this is a really well put together Bond film. I spoke about the soundtrack in the last one. I can't remember if there was anything that I left unsaid, but obviously it's a Hans Zimmer score. I'm going to do a review of the soundtrack to this, actually as an album. I haven't played it yet, but like I say, it wasn't too generic for Hans Zimmer. There were some music cues in this that were kind of reminding me of the Dark Knight trilogy as well, and I thought, I know that music. That was from the Dark Knight trilogy. It sounded like it was like leading into some like music. Only for like a few seconds or so. It wasn't like full blown like reuse of the score from that film. But then I'd kind of forgotten momentarily that it was Hans Zimmer. I was like, oh yeah, he's reusing music cues, which he did a lot through his career anyway. He's been doing soundtracks for decades as Hans Zimmer. But yeah, this was a good one anyway. So right, yeah, I'll cut it short there. Anyway, that's pretty much all I've got to say. I just wanted to tidy up a few things that I'd spoken about in the previous video, but get into specifics. So obviously that's why I've gone into spoilers here. So full recommendation. I'll just wrap this up by saying, yeah, I mean this has been kind of the end of a bit of a journey, really. I mean, obviously everything that's been going on with the coronavirus nonsense since last year. To me, this really, in terms of anything that started like affecting my plans, it started with this movie getting delayed. I mean, obviously, on the grand scale of things, who cares about a movie? But that was the first thing, really, where anything got like cancelled that I had planned. So to actually see this film, I think there's like a sense of completion now, regardless as to how everything else drags on going forward. At least we've got to see this movie for what it's worth. Like I say, in the grand scheme of things, movies don't matter, but it was just nice to be able to put this behind me, because it was kind of symbolic in a lot of ways. So I would say go see this movie. Hopefully it does well financially. I heard that it needs about 900 million or something just to break even. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but a lot of people are saying it doesn't stand a chance of making that. It doesn't surprise me because they've marketed this film 3 times now, so it doesn't surprise me that that it needs to make that kind of money to break even at the very least, if that's accurate anyway. So one very last thing I will say, speaking of Bond on record, I did a video last year talking about the release of this compilation album. I haven't played it yet because I've only just received it. It looks awesome. It's got every single Bond theme, the original recordings, from what I gather from having looked at it, all of them non-excluded, on this album, which I don't know of any record or even a CD that's ever been released to tie in with a Bond film release that includes every song in sequential order, including the most recent one. I could be wrong, there might have been one, but I don't know of one, and I would have bought it in the past if I'd have known. But yeah, this looks awesome anyway. So I'm going to do a review of this at some point as well. But yeah, it's got all of the Bond themes on there, so pretty chuffed with that anyway. So I'll leave there. No Time to Die. Go watch it if you're a Bond fan. If you're not, you'll probably still enjoy it as well. I would highly rate this film, and like I said, despite some of the directions that they've taken it in, I think you can forgive it if you've got a problem with that. Right, thank you very much for watching.